Kichi arrived before the cock even cleared its throat. A small girl with calloused hands and worn slippers stood at the iron gates of the grandest mansion she had ever seen. Her name was Kichi, and she was only 12 years old, but life had already taught her that survival meant silence and service. Behind those gates lived the Okafor family, one of the wealthiest dynasties in all of Lagos. What Kichi didn't know was that stepping through those gates would unravel a family secret so shocking, it would change everything she thought she knew about herself. The black SUV that brought her from the village had long disappeared into the busy Lagos traffic, leaving behind only the smell of exhaust and the weight of abandonment. Kichi clutched her small Ghana must-go bag closer to her chest. Inside were her only possessions in the world: 2 faded wrappers, a torn school uniform she would never wear again, and a crumpled photograph of the woman who had raised her until she died 3 years ago. The woman everyone called her mother, though whispers in the village always suggested otherwise. The mansion towered above her like a golden mountain. Glass windows reflected the afternoon sun like diamonds. Manicured lawns stretched in every direction, dotted with flowers that looked too perfect to be real. Even the gate itself was a work of art. Carved iron twisted into elegant patterns that probably cost more than her entire village made in a year. Kichi had never seen wealth like this. She had never imagined it existed outside the pages of the old magazines that sometimes found their way to the village market. A uniformed security guard emerged from a small booth beside the gate. He looked her up and down with the kind of expression people reserved for stray dogs that wandered too close to clean compounds. His uniform was crisp, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him screamed that he belonged in this world of perfection, while everything about her screamed that she did not. "Are you the girl from the village?" he asked, his voice carrying the particular blend of disdain and boredom that came from years of looking down on people he considered beneath him. Kichi nodded silently. She had learned long ago that speaking too much only brought trouble. The guard pressed a button, and the massive gates swung open with a soft, electronic hum. He jerked his head toward the house. "Go straight to the back entrance. Don't touch anything. Don't look at anything too long. And don't make any noise." The walk up the circular driveway felt like a journey through another world. Her rubber slippers made soft, slapping sounds against the perfectly paved stones. Every step echoed in the silence, making her feel like an intruder in a sacred space. She passed a fountain where water danced in impossible patterns, cars that gleamed like precious metals, and flower beds arranged with mathematical precision. This wasn't just wealth. This was power made visible. At the back entrance, a woman in a starched uniform waited with crossed arms and a face that looked like it had never smiled. She was tall and thin, with skin pulled tight over sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to catalog every flaw they encountered. Her hair was pulled back so severely it stretched her features into a permanent expression of disapproval. This was Mrs. Aduni, the head of household staff, and she ruled the domestic operations of the Okafor mansion with the iron fist of someone who had clawed her way up from nothing and refused to let anyone forget it. "So you're the new girl?" Mrs. Aduni said, circling Kichi like a buyer examining livestock at market. "The village sent us another skinny one." "Well, skinny or not, you'll work like everyone else. Maybe harder since you look like you need feeding up." She gestured toward the back door with a sharp flick of her wrist. "Come. Let me show you what your life looks like now." The servants' quarters were a different world from the mansion proper. Here the floors were simple concrete, the walls bare except for a few faded motivational posters about hard work and discipline. The air smelled of disinfectant, and the lingering aroma of countless meals prepared for people who would never eat them. Keiichi was shown to a small room with 2 narrow beds, a single window, and a wooden box that served as both table and storage. Her roommate was another girl, perhaps 16, with tired eyes and hands that bore the calluses of endless labor. "My name is Adaeze," the older girl said after Mrs. Aduni left them alone. She spoke in the cautious whisper of someone who had learned that walls had ears and ears had mouths. "I've been here for 3 years. Let me tell you the rules that will keep you alive in this place." She sat on her bed and counted on her fingers. First, never speak unless spoken to by the family. Second, never look them directly in the eyes unless they demand it. Third, never touch anything that doesn't belong to you. Fourth, never ask questions about family business. And fifth, never, ever make them remember that you exist unless they need something. Keiichi listened carefully, filing away each rule like a survival manual. "But what about the family?" she asked. "What are they like?" Adaeze glanced toward the door, then leaned closer. "Mr. Okafor is the big man. He owns half the oil wells in the Niger Delta and the other half wants to be owned by him. He's not cruel, just cold, like talking to a statue made of money. Mrs. Okafor is the real danger. She's beautiful like a magazine cover, but beautiful the way a snake is beautiful. She fires girls for breathing too loud." "And the children," Keiichi whispered. "There are 2. Chinedu is the son. He's in university studying business, being groomed to take over the empire. He's not terrible, just completely unaware that poor people exist. Then there's Adana, the daughter. She's your age, maybe a little older. That one is trouble wrapped in designer clothes. She treats the staff like entertainment, like we exist for her amusement." That first night, Keiichi lay on her narrow bed staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of wealth settling around her. Even in the servants' quarters, she could hear the hum of central air conditioning, the distant murmur of televisions playing in rooms larger than her entire village house, the soft whoosh of automatic sprinkler systems keeping the gardens perfect. She pulled out her photograph and whispered to the woman who had raised her. "Mama, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I belong anywhere." But belonging, she would soon learn, was more complicated than anyone had ever told her. Because the next morning, when she was assigned to clean the family's private living areas, she would see something that would plant the first seed of a mystery that would grow into the most important discovery of her life. In the family portrait gallery, among dozens of professional photographs of the Okafors through the years, she would spot a face that looked impossibly familiar. A face that looked like her own, staring back from a photograph of people who were supposed to be strangers. The morning alarm came at 4:30, cutting through the darkness like a blade. Keiichi jerked awake, her heart pounding from dreams of village fires and laughing faces that turned cruel in the moonlight. Beside her, Adaeze was already moving, her motions efficient and practiced. "No time for slowly waking up," she whispered. "Mrs. Aduni expects us in the kitchen by 5, and being late means no breakfast." The kitchen was a cathedral of efficiency. Stainless steel surfaces gleamed under bright fluorescent lights. Industrial-sized refrigerators hummed with the promise of meals that would feed dozens. The breakfast preparation had already begun, orchestrated by the head cook, a massive woman named Mama Emeka who ruled her domain with wooden spoons and withering glares. She assigned tasks with the precision of a military commander. Keiichi found herself polishing silver that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. By 6:30, the family breakfast was ready. Keiichi had never seen food presented like art before. fresh fruits arranged in perfect spirals, bread that looked like it had been blessed by angels, eggs prepared 3 different ways, depending on individual preferences. She watched through the kitchen's service window as the Okafor family gathered around their dining table, and for the first time, she saw them as more than just names whispered in cautious conversations. Mr. Okafor was exactly as Adiezi had described. Tall, imposing, with silver hair that caught the morning light and eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they encountered. He read newspapers while eating, occasionally grunting approval or disapproval at whatever news the world had delivered overnight. His presence filled the room like expensive cologne, commanding attention without demanding it. Mrs. Okafor was breathtaking in the way that dangerous things often are. Her skin seemed to glow with the kind of health that money could buy. Her hair fell in perfect waves that had clearly been styled by expert hands, and her clothes fit like they had been sewn directly onto her body. But there was something cold in her beauty. Something that reminded Keiichi of the marble statues she had seen in pictures of foreign museums. Beautiful, but carved from stone. Their son Chinedu was a younger version of his father, already learning to wear wealth like a comfortable coat. He scrolled through his phone while eating, occasionally making comments about stock prices or business deals that went over Keiichi's head completely. His casual mentions of numbers that represented more money than entire villages would see in generations made her realize just how different their worlds were. But it was Adana who captured Keiichi's attention most completely. The daughter was indeed around her age, but she moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Her school uniform was perfectly pressed, her hair styled in intricate braids that probably took hours to achieve, and she wore jewelry that caught the light like tiny suns. She complained about her breakfast, demanded changes to her schedule, and spoke to the serving staff with the casual cruelty of someone who had never considered that they might have feelings. After breakfast, Mrs. Aduni assigned Keiichi to dust the family's private living areas. This was considered an honor among the household staff, a sign that the new girl was trusted with the family's most personal spaces. But as Keiichi moved through rooms that looked like museum exhibits, carefully cleaning surfaces that probably cost more than houses, she began to understand that this trust came with its own dangers. She was seeing how the family really lived, beyond the public faces they showed to the world. The living room was a testament to wealth so complete it had become art. Sofas that looked like they had never been sat on, tables that reflected light like mirrors, and walls covered with paintings that seemed to watch her as she worked. But it was the family portrait gallery that stopped her cold. Dozens of photographs in expensive frames, documenting the Okafor family through generations of success and prosperity. She moved along the wall, dusting each frame carefully, studying the faces of people who had built and maintained this empire of wealth. There were formal portraits, casual family gatherings, business celebrations, and vacation photos from places she had only heard about in stories. The Okafors had documented their lives like royalty, preserving every important moment for posterity. And then she saw it. In a photograph tucked slightly behind the others, as if someone had tried to hide it without actually removing it completely. The picture showed Mr. and Mrs. Okafor from perhaps 15 years ago, standing beside a hospital bed where a woman held a newborn baby. The woman in the bed was clearly exhausted, but radiant with joy, her face glowing with the particular happiness that comes with new motherhood. But it was the baby that made Keiichi's hands tremble and her heart race. The child in the photograph looked exactly like Keiichi had looked as a baby, based on the few early pictures she had seen of herself. The same wide eyes, the same distinctive birthmark on the left cheek, the same curl pattern in the sparse baby hair. She stared at the photograph for long minutes, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The baby was clearly being presented to the Okafors as if it belonged to them, but Kechi had never heard mention of a third child. She looked around quickly, making sure she was alone, then carefully lifted the photograph to examine it more closely. The handwriting was feminine, flowing, and somehow familiar. Kechi's mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Could this be some relative's child? Some cousin or nephew she hadn't heard about? But the way the Okafors were looking at the baby, with such obvious love and pride, suggested something much more personal. Her hands were shaking as she returned the photograph to its place. Questions flooded her mind like water through a broken dam. Who was this baby? Why had the photograph been hidden? And why did the child look so much like her? She tried to focus on her cleaning, but her eyes kept drifting back to that hidden photograph, as if it might reveal more secrets if she stared at it long enough. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of confused thoughts and racing heartbeats. She went through the motions of her duties, but her mind was elsewhere, trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed to have too many missing pieces. During lunch break, she sat with Adayezi in the servants' quarters, picking at her food and trying to find a way to ask questions without revealing what she had discovered. "Adayezi," she said carefully, "has the family always had just 2 children?" Adayezi looked up from her plate of rice and stew, surprised by the question. "As far as I know, yes. Why do you ask?" Kechi shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just curious about the family history. Sometimes rich families have children they don't talk about much." The older girl's expression grew serious. "Listen, Kechi, I told you the rules yesterday. One of them was never ask questions about family business. There are things about every wealthy family that are better left alone. Stories that are none of our concern. Trust me when I say that curiosity is a luxury we can't afford." She reached across the small table and placed her hand over Kechi's. "Whatever you think you've seen or heard, forget it. Your life will be much simpler that way." But forgetting was impossible. That afternoon, as Kechi scrubbed floors and washed windows, the image of that baby haunted her thoughts. She found herself studying her reflection in the glass surfaces she cleaned, looking for features that might connect her to the family she served. The birthmark on her cheek seemed more prominent than usual, as if it were trying to tell her something she wasn't ready to hear. That evening, after the family had finished dinner and retired to their private activities, Kechi found herself drawn back to the portrait gallery. She told herself she was just doing a final check of her cleaning, making sure everything was perfect for tomorrow's inspection. But really, she needed to see that photograph again, to confirm that she hadn't imagined the resemblance that had shaken her so profoundly. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of television from the family's private wing. Kechi moved through the living room like a ghost, her bare feet silent on the expensive rugs. She reached the portrait gallery and quickly located the hidden photograph. By the light of her small flashlight, she studied the image again, and her heart sank as she realized she had not been mistaken. The baby in the photograph looked exactly like her. But this time, she noticed something else. In the background of the photograph, barely visible, was a small stuffed elephant, pink and purple with one ear slightly torn. Kechi's breath caught in her throat because she knew that elephant. It was the only toy she had ever owned, the one possession that had survived her journey from whatever life she had lived before her adoptive mother found her. The elephant currently sat on her bed in the servants' quarters, threadbare and faded but still treasured. The coincidence was impossible. Toys like that were not common, especially not with that particular combination of colors and that specific tear in the ear. There was only one explanation that made sense, and it was so impossible that her mind recoiled from accepting it. But as she stood there in the darkness, staring at a photograph that seemed to contain the key to her entire identity, she could no longer deny what her heart was trying to tell her. The baby in the photograph was her. The Okafors weren't just her employers. They were her family. The morning came too soon for Kichi, but her body was already trained to wake before the sun painted the sky. She rolled off the thin mattress they had given her in the small servants' quarters, her mind still heavy with the weight of yesterday's discovery. That photograph, that toy, those eyes that looked so much like her own, everything swirled in her head like a storm she couldn't calm. She wrapped her thin wrapper around her shoulders and stepped onto the cold, concrete floor. The house was still quiet, the kind of silence that held secrets in every corner. But today, the silence felt different. It felt like it was hiding something bigger than she had imagined. As she swept the compound, her movements were automatic, but her thoughts were loud. The broom moved across the ground, but her mind was moving through possibilities. Could it be true? Could she really be connected to this family in ways that went deeper than servitude? The questions burned in her chest like hot coals. Inside the main house, the Okafor family was beginning their morning routine. Chief Okafor sat at the dining table, his newspaper spread before him like a map of the world's problems. His wife, Adana, moved through the kitchen with the precision of someone who had run households for decades. Their son, Emeka, was already dressed for school, his uniform crisp and his shoes polished to mirror brightness. But it was their daughter, Kioma, who caught Keiichi's attention this morning. As Keiichi entered to serve breakfast, she noticed something she had never seen before. Kioma was holding a small wooden elephant, turning it over in her hands with a strange expression on her face. Keiichi's heart stopped. It was identical to the one she had seen in the photograph, the one that looked exactly like her own treasured toy. "Kioma, put that old thing away," Adana said, not looking up from her tea. "But Mama, I found it in the storage room upstairs." Chief Okafor glanced up from his newspaper, his eyes flickering with something Keiichi couldn't quite read. "Your mother is right," but Keiichi saw it. That flash of recognition in his eyes. That moment when his composure cracked just slightly. She quickly busied herself with clearing the breakfast dishes, but her ears were tuned to every word. "Papa, why do we have so many children's things in storage?" Kioma's voice was curious, innocent, but her questions hung in the air like smoke. The room went quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that screamed louder than any argument. "Kioma, finish your breakfast. You'll be late for school," Adana said, her voice sharp with finality. But Kioma wasn't finished. "And Papa, why do you sometimes stare at the maids like you're looking for something?" Chief Okafor's cup clinked against his saucer as he set it down too hard. "Kioma, enough questions." As the family dispersed, Keiichi remained in the dining room, her hands trembling as she wiped down the table. The wooden elephant lay forgotten on Kioma's chair, and without thinking, Keiichi picked it up. The moment her fingers touched the smooth wood, a flash of memory hit her like lightning. She was small, maybe 4 years old, sitting in a beautiful room with toys scattered around her. A woman with kind eyes, a woman who looked remarkably like Adana but softer, gentler, was showing her how to make the elephant dance on a table. The woman was laughing, calling her my precious girl, and there was love in her voice. Real love. Kichi gasped, nearly dropping the elephant. The memory was so vivid, so real, that it made her knees weak. She quickly placed the toy back on the chair and hurried toward the kitchen, her heart pounding like drums in her chest. In the kitchen, she found the older cook, Mama Ngozi, preparing lunch. Mama Ngozi had been with the family for over 15 years, and if anyone knew the family's secrets, it would be her. Mama Ngozi, Kichi said quietly, glancing around to make sure they were alone. The older woman looked up from her chopping, her weathered face creased with concern. The storage room upstairs, the one with all the children's things. Mama Ngozi's knife stopped moving. She set it down slowly and looked at Kichi with eyes that suddenly seemed very old and very sad. Please, Mama. I need to know. Mama Ngozi wiped her hands on her apron and looked toward the door, making sure no one was listening. Then she moved closer to Kichi, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Those things belonged to their first daughter. Kichi's breath caught. Yes. Before Kioma, before Emeka, there was another child, a little girl named Adaeze. Mama Ngozi's eyes filled with tears. She disappeared. One day she was there, playing in the garden, laughing with her mother. The next day, she was gone. Kichi felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. About 4 years old, it nearly killed Madame Adana. She searched everywhere, hired investigators, offered rewards, but nothing. No trace, no clues, no answers. He was different then, kinder, gentler. After Adaeze disappeared, he became hard, distant. He threw himself into his business, traveled constantly. Kichi's mind was racing, 4 years old, the same age she would have been when her adoptive parents found her. The same age she was in that flash of memory with the wooden elephant. The older woman studied Kichi's face carefully, as if seeing her for the first time. She had dark eyes, like pools of water, curly hair that her mother loved to braid. Without thinking, Kichi looked down at her left palm. There, faint but unmistakable, was a thin white scar she had always wondered about. Mama Ngozi followed her gaze and gasped. Kichi extended her palm, and Mama Ngozi examined the scar with shaking fingers. This scar, it's in the exact same place. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of their breathing. Mama Ngozi looked at Kichi's face, studying every feature, every curve, every angle. My adoptive parents said it was sometime in the dry season. Mama Ngozi's hand flew to her mouth. Adaeze would be 12 now. The revelation hit Kichi like a physical blow. Everything was falling into place. The pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know she was solving. The photograph, the toy, the scar, the age, the resemblance, it all pointed to one impossible, incredible truth. Before the older woman could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mama Ngozi quickly turned back to her chopping, and Kichi busied herself with washing dishes, but the air between them crackled with unspoken understanding. Adana entered the kitchen, her usual composed expression in place. Mama Ngozi, I need you to prepare something special for dinner tonight. Adana's eyes fell on Kichi, and for a moment, something flickered across her face. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Kichi caught it. A look of recognition, of confusion, of something that might have been hope buried deep beneath years of pain. You, Adana said to Kichi, her voice softer than usual. Kichi followed her out of the kitchen, her heart hammering. They walked through the house in silence until they reached the sitting room. Adana turned to face her, and Kichi was surprised to see tears in her eyes. Your real name? Kichi's throat tightened. I don't know, Ma. Adana moved closer, her eyes searching Kichi's face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Kichi extended both palms, and Adana examined them carefully. When she saw the scar, she made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. I don't know, Ma. Adana's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out to touch Kichi's cheek. My God, it's not possible. Child, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you ever had dreams or memories of being in this house before? Kichi's eyes widened. Yes, Ma. Just this morning, I remembered playing with a wooden elephant. Adana's legs gave out, and she sank onto the sofa, her whole body shaking. Adaz! My Adaz! The name hit Kichi like a thunderbolt. Adaz! The moment she heard it, something deep inside her recognized it, claimed it, remembered it. I'm saying that you might be my daughter, my real daughter. The room spun around Kichi. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her life, about her identity, was crumbling and rebuilding itself in real time. But how, Ma? I don't know, child, but I'm going to find out. Adana stood up, her maternal instincts overriding her shock. We need to do a DNA test. Ma, what if it's true? Adana pulled Kichi into her arms, holding her tight for the first time in 8 years. Then we have a lot of lost time to make up for, my precious girl. As they held each other, both crying now, neither of them noticed Chief Okafor standing in the doorway, his face pale and his eyes wide with recognition and fear. He had heard everything, seen everything, and now he knew that the secret he had buried so deep was clawing its way back to the surface. The truth was coming, whether he was ready for it or not. That evening, as the house settled into its nighttime quiet, Kichi lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was too active for sleep, too full of possibilities and questions and fears. Could she really be Adayeze Okafor? Could she really be the daughter of the people she had been serving? And if it was true, what did that mean for everyone involved? What secrets would come to light? What lies would be exposed? In the main house, Adana sat in her bedroom, holding the wooden elephant and staring at a photograph of her lost daughter. For the first time in 8 years, she felt something she had thought was dead forever. Hope. The air inside the mansion crackled with tension that could cut glass. Mama Gloria stood in the center of the grand living room, her royal Ankara wrapper gleaming under the chandelier like armor prepared for battle. Her jewel was tied high and sharp, each fold a declaration of war. Naomi remained close beside her, still trembling from the earthquake of revelations that had shaken her world to its core. Henry and Vanessa stood across from them, their faces pale as morning mist, shifting nervously like thieves caught red-handed in broad daylight. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, until Mama Gloria's voice sliced through it like a machete through thick bush. You both have exactly 5 minutes to pack your belongings and leave my house, she announced, her words falling like hammer blows on iron. 5 minutes, not 6, not 7. Henry's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Mama, please, you can't just throw us out like this. We've been living here for years. Mama Gloria's eyes blazed with the fire of 1,000 suns. Your home? She laughed, but it was the kind of laughter that made grown men weep. You mean the home where you locked me in a back room like a discarded piece of furniture? Vanessa stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor like a death march. "You were sick, Mama. We couldn't have known you would recover." The slap came so fast that even Naomi didn't see it coming. Mama Gloria's palm connected with Vanessa's cheek with a sound like thunder, and the younger woman stumbled backward, her hand flying to her face in shock. Mama Gloria roared, her voice shaking the crystal glasses on the side table. "You call stealing management? You call betrayal management?" Henry tried to step between them, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Mama, please, let's talk about this calmly. We can work something out. We can share the company, share the house." Mama Gloria turned on him with the fury of a hurricane. "Share? Share what exactly? Share the empire you tried to steal from under my dying body?" She pointed a finger at him that seemed to carry the weight of divine judgment. "You are not the son I raised. You are not the man your brother was." Naomi watched in stunned silence as the woman who had become her anchor, her salvation, transformed into an avenging angel. This was not the frail, bedridden grandmother she had been caring for. This was a warrior queen reclaiming her throne, and the sight filled her with both awe and terror. Vanessa whimpered, her earlier defiance crumbling like sand in rain. "We have no other place." Mama Gloria's smile was as cold as Harmattan wind. "Should have thought about that before you decided to dance on my grave while I was still breathing." She clapped her hands twice, and as if summoned by magic, 2 uniformed security men appeared at the doorway. Their faces were stern, their postures military straight, and they carried themselves with the authority of men who had seen real battle. "Gentlemen," Mama Gloria addressed them without taking her eyes off Henry and Vanessa, "please escort these former residents to their rooms to collect their personal belongings." Henry's composure finally cracked completely. He dropped to his knees on the marble floor, his expensive suit wrinkling as he crawled toward his mother. "Mama, I'm begging you. I'm your son, your blood. Don't do this to me. I made mistakes. Yes, but I can change." For a moment, something flickered in Mama Gloria's eyes, a shadow of the love she had once held for this man who had come from her womb, who had once been her little boy. But then her gaze shifted to Naomi, to the girl who had been treated like dirt in the very house where she was the rightful princess, and her heart hardened like cooling steel. "You stopped being my son the day you chose greed over family," she said quietly. "You stopped being my son the day you locked me away like a shameful secret." The security men moved forward, their heavy boots echoing in the marble-floored room. Henry scrambled to his feet, his face wet with tears that carried no dignity, only desperation. Vanessa stood frozen, her mind apparently unable to process the speed with which her comfortable world was collapsing around her. "This isn't over," Vanessa finally found her voice, though it shook like leaves in a storm. "We'll fight this. We'll take you to court. We'll prove that you're not mentally fit to make these decisions." Mama Gloria stepped closer to Vanessa, close enough that the younger woman could smell the expensive perfume that spoke of power and old money. "Let me tell you something, my dear daughter-in-law. I built this empire when you were still sucking your thumb and wetting your bed. I have lawyers who could make the devil himself sign a confession." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle like dust after an explosion. "But more importantly, I have the truth on my side. And the truth, my dear, is that you are thieves. You are parasites." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. The security men efficiently escorted Henry and Vanessa to their rooms, standing guard while they hastily threw clothes and personal items into suitcases. The other household staff, the ones who had been loyal to Mama Gloria before her illness, watched from doorways and corners, their faces carefully neutral, but their eyes bright with satisfaction. Naomi found herself following the procession, unable to look away from the dramatic reversal of fortune unfolding before her eyes. These were the people who had treated her like she was less than human, who had made her climb through windows to care for the woman who turned out to be her own grandmother. Now they were the ones being driven out, their heads bowed in shame and defeat. When they reached the main entrance, Mama Gloria was waiting, still regal in her ankara and gel, her hands folded in front of her like a queen receiving defeated enemies. 2 Ghana must-go bags sat beside her, bulging with hastily packed belongings. "Your transportation is waiting," she announced, nodding toward an old taxi that looked like it had seen better decades. The contrast with the luxury vehicles they had been accustomed to was stark and intentional. Henry made one last desperate attempt. "Mama, please, at least let us stay until we can find proper accommodation." Mama Gloria's expression didn't change. "You gave me months of neglect and abuse. You gave my granddaughter years of servitude and humiliation. I'm giving you exactly what you deserve." As the taxi pulled away, carrying Henry and Vanessa toward their uncertain future, Mama Gloria placed a gentle hand on Naomi's shoulder. The girl was staring after the disappearing vehicle, her emotions a tangled mess of triumph, confusion, and something that might have been pity. Mama Gloria asked softly. Naomi considered the question carefully. "Not sorry exactly, but it's strange, watching people's lives change so fast." Mama Gloria nodded approvingly. "That's wisdom talking. Never celebrate another person's downfall, even when they deserve it." They stood together in the doorway, grandmother and granddaughter, looking out at the compound that now truly belonged to them. The mansion rose behind them like a monument to perseverance, its windows gleaming in the afternoon sun like watchful eyes. Naomi asked, her voice small in the vast space of her new reality. Mama Gloria smiled, and for the first time in months, it was a smile of pure joy rather than strategic calculation. "Now, my dear child, we begin the real work. We rebuild the empire your father created. We restore honor to the family name." She turned to face Naomi fully, her hands reaching out to cup the girl's face with infinite tenderness. "But first, we heal. We learn. We grow strong together. Because you are not just my granddaughter, Naomi." The weight of destiny settled on Naomi's shoulders like a royal robe. She thought of the village that had rejected her, the family that had sold her, the long journey that had brought her to this moment. Every hardship, every tear, every moment of despair had been leading to this revelation, this homecoming, this rebirth. "I won't let you down, Mama," she whispered, and in her voice was the strength of ancestors, the determination of survivors, the fire of queens. Mama Gloria pulled her close, holding her as she had dreamed of doing for so many years. "You could never let me down, my child. You saved my life when I had given up hope. You brought light into my darkness when I was surrounded by enemies." As the sun began to set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the mansion settled into a new rhythm. The servants who had remained loyal began preparing for the evening, their movements lighter now that the oppressive presence of Henry and Vanessa had been lifted. The house itself seemed to breathe easier, its rooms filling with the promise of better days ahead. In the master bedroom that had once belonged to her son Daniel, Mama Gloria opened wardrobes that had been locked for years. Inside were clothes that had belonged to Naomi's mother, Clara. carefully preserved and waiting. Dresses in soft fabrics, shoes in small sizes, jewelry that caught the light like captured stars. "These were your mother's," Mama Gloria said, her voice thick with emotion. She was beautiful, kind, intelligent. Naomi reached out to touch a blue dress, its fabric smooth and cool under her fingers. "You have her eyes," Mama Gloria replied. "Her smile, her gentle spirit. But you have something else too, something that perhaps she never had to develop. You have steel in your spine, fire in your heart." That night, as Naomi lay in her new bed, in her new room, in her new life, she thought about the incredible journey that had brought her here. From the village that had called her a witch to the mansion where she was now recognized as a princess. From the girl who had been sold like property to the heir of a business empire. The photograph of her adoptive mother still sat on the bedside table, but now it was joined by new pictures, images of her real parents, of the grandmother who had become her salvation, of the family she had never known she belonged to. The past and present merged in that collection of faces, telling a story of loss and recovery, of pain and healing, of endings that were really beginnings. But even as she embraced her new reality, Naomi knew that her story was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new tests of her character and strength. She would have to learn to be not just a granddaughter, but a businesswoman. Not just a survivor, but a leader. Not just a girl who had been saved, but a woman who would save others. The mansion around her hummed with possibility, its walls holding secrets and stories that she was only beginning to understand. And somewhere in the city below, in boardrooms and offices, in the corridors of power and influence, people were already talking about the return of Mama Gloria and the emergence of her mysterious granddaughter. The truth that Kechi had discovered was about to shake the very foundations of the Okafor mansion. As the DNA results were being processed, she found herself caught between two worlds, the servant she had always been, and the daughter she might truly be. The weight of this possibility pressed down on her chest like a stone, making it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to believe that after all these years of suffering, God might finally be answering her prayers. But revelation has a way of arriving like lightning, sudden and impossible to ignore. 3 days after the samples were taken, Mama Ngozi received a phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but the words hit like thunder. "The results are conclusive, 9% match." The phone slipped from Mama Ngozi's trembling hands. She stared at Kechi, who was quietly folding laundry in the corner of the room, completely unaware that her entire world was about to transform. This girl, this precious child, who had been sold like a bag of rice, who had scrubbed floors and served meals while her own family lived in luxury just floors above her, was blood of her blood, flesh of her flesh. "Kechi," Mama Ngozi whispered, her voice breaking like dry leaves. Kechi approached slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Something in Mama Ngozi's voice was different. Not the usual kindness she had grown accustomed to, but something deeper. Something that sounded like recognition, like coming home. "Sit down," Mama Ngozi said gently, patting the bed beside her. Kechi's hands shook as she sat down. The old woman took her face in her weathered palms, studying every feature with eyes that were now seeing clearly for the first time in years. "You are Adai's," she said simply. "You are my granddaughter." The words hung in the air like smoke. Kechi blinked once, twice, 3 times, as if blinking could change what she had just heard. "Mama, I don't understand. I'm just Kechi. I'm nobody special." Mama Ngozi's eyes filled with tears. "No, my precious child. You are everything special. You are the missing piece of our family." Before Kechi could respond, the door burst open. Adana stood in the doorway, her face flushed with excitement and disbelief. She had been listening from the hallway, unable to contain her curiosity about the mysterious phone call and the hushed conversations. Adana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama Ngozi nodded, tears streaming down her face. "She is your sister. She is my granddaughter." The room fell silent except for the sound of 3 women crying. But these weren't tears of sorrow. These were tears of joy, of recognition, of a family finally finding its way back to wholeness. Adana rushed forward and threw her arms around Kechi, who sat frozen in shock. "I knew it," she sobbed. "I knew there was something special about you. I could feel it in my spirit. You're my sister." Kechi finally found her voice, though it came out as a whisper. "But how? How is this possible? I was told my parents died. I was told I was nothing." Mama Ngozi held her tighter. "You were stolen from us, my child. When you were just 4 years old, you disappeared from this very house. We searched everywhere. We hired investigators. We never stopped looking for you." The pieces began falling into place like a puzzle solving itself. The scar on Kechi's arm that matched the description of little Adaizi's injury. The way she had always felt drawn to certain rooms in the house. The inexplicable sense of familiarity she felt when she first saw the family photographs. "Your father," Mama Ngozi continued. "Your real father. My son. He died in a car accident along with your mother when you were 7. But you had already been missing for 3 years by then. We thought you had died too. We mourned you." Kechi's world tilted on its axis. Everything she had believed about herself, about her life, about her worth, was crumbling and rebuilding itself in the same moment. She wasn't the unwanted village girl. She wasn't the cursed child. She wasn't the servant who should be grateful for scraps. She was Adaize Okafor. She was the heir to a fortune. She was the missing daughter who had been mourned and searched for. She was loved, wanted, precious. She asked, her voice small and uncertain. Mama Ngozi smiled through her tears. "Now, my darling, we take back what was always yours. We restore your place in this family." But even as the joy of discovery filled the room, Kechi couldn't shake the feeling that this revelation would not be welcomed by everyone in the house. There were people who had benefited from her absence, people who had assumed control of what should have been hers, people who would not be happy to see the true heir return. As if reading her thoughts, Mama Ngozi's expression grew serious. "There will be challenges, my child. There are those in this house who have grown comfortable with the way things are. They will not welcome this news, but we are strong, and we are together now." Adana squeezed her sister's hand. "I'll stand with you," she promised. That night, as Kechi lay in her small servants' quarters, for what she somehow knew would be the last time, she stared at the ceiling and tried to process the magnitude of what had happened. Tomorrow, she would wake up not as Kechi the maid, but as Adaize Okafor, the rightful heir to the Okafor fortune. She thought about the village where she had grown up, about the woman who had raised her believing she was doing good by taking in an abandoned child. She thought about the years of struggle, the hunger, the loneliness, the feeling of never belonging anywhere. And she thought about the grace of God, who had allowed her to find her way back home not as a visitor, but as family. not as a servant, but as a daughter. The next morning would bring confrontations, revelations, and the beginning of a battle for her rightful place. But tonight, for the first time in her life, Kechi felt the peace that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you belong. The DNA results changed everything. Kechi, now confirmed as a Daeze, stood in the Okafor family living room, her hands trembling as she held the official document. The numbers stared back at her like a confession written in scientific certainty. 99.9% match. She was their daughter. She was home. But the joy felt heavy, mixed with years of pain that couldn't be erased by paperwork. Mrs. Okafor wept openly, her designer makeup running down her cheeks like broken promises. Mr. Okafor sat frozen in his leather chair, staring at the girl who had been cleaning their floors while carrying their blood in her veins. "My baby," Mrs. Okafor whispered, reaching out with shaking hands. "Maya dies. We mourned you. We buried an empty coffin." Kechi, still learning to answer to her real name, didn't move closer. The distance between them felt like an ocean of lost time. "I remember fragments," she said quietly. A woman singing, warm hands, the smell of jasmine perfume. Mr. Okafor finally found his voice. "The day you disappeared, we were at the market. Your mother was buying fabric for your 5th birthday dress. You were playing with other children near the toy cellar. When we turned around, you were gone. We searched everywhere. The police, private investigators, traditional healers. Nothing. They said you might have fallen into the river or been taken by traffickers. That I was sold to a village family who treated me like a curse." Kechi finished, her voice steady but her eyes burning. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. The weight of stolen childhood pressed down on them all. Mrs. Okafor stood slowly, her movements careful like she was approaching a wounded animal. "We failed you. Even when you were here in our house, we didn't see you. I didn't see you." "The scar," Mr. Okafor said suddenly. Kechi rolled up her sleeve, revealing the crescent-shaped mark she'd carried since childhood. Mr. Okafor's breath caught. "You fell from the swing set when you were 3. 6 stitches." Something flickered in Kechi's memory. A deep voice, gentle hands, a song that made her laugh through tears. "Dumbo the elephant dancing in the rain," she whispered. "You remember," Mr. Okafor said, his voice breaking. "Pieces, like looking through broken glass." Mrs. Okafor moved closer, her hands hovering near Kechi's face like she was afraid to touch. "We can build new memories. We can't get back the years we lost, but we can start from here." Kechi asked, and for the first time since entering the house, she sounded like the 12-year-old girl she was. "Can we really? Or will you always see the maid who cleaned your floors?" The questions hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Okafor's face crumpled. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to be the mother you needed then, or the mother you need now. But I want to try." Mr. Okafor stood up, his movements heavy with guilt. "The house staff, they're all being questioned. Someone helped orchestrate this. Someone knew who you were and kept quiet. This wasn't just random tragedy." Kechi asked, "We're going to find out. Every person who had access to our home, every employee, every family member who knew about the search. Someone sold information." Mrs. Okafor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Your room. Your real room. It's exactly as you left it. We never touched anything. The toys, the clothes, the books," Kechi asked. They walked upstairs together, an awkward procession of strangers trying to remember how to be family. The room was at the end of the hall, behind a door that looked like it had been painted recently. Mrs. Okafor turned the handle with reverence. The room was frozen in time. Pink walls with hand-painted butterflies, a small bed with a canopy of white lace, stuffed animals arranged precisely on shelves, a dollhouse in the corner, its tiny furniture still perfectly placed. Everything was clean, dusted, maintained like a museum of lost childhood. Keiichi stepped inside and felt something shift in her chest. The walls seemed familiar. The light from the window fell in a pattern that stirred something deep in her memory. She walked to the dollhouse and picked up a tiny ceramic tea set. Her fingers moved automatically, arranging the pieces in a specific order. "You always did that," Mrs. Okafor whispered. "The cups had to be perfectly aligned, the plates stacked just so." "I still am," Keiichi said, surprised by the recognition. "In the village, even when I had nothing, I arranged my few belongings the same way every night." "It was memory," Mr. Okafor said. Keiichi sat on the small bed, the mattress still firm after all these years. "What happens now? Do I go back to school? Do I learn to be your daughter again?" "We don't pretend anything," Mrs. Okafor said firmly. "We acknowledge everything. The pain, the loss, the mistakes." "And the people who did this?" Mr. Okafor's jaw tightened. "They'll face justice. They'll answer for their part. But Keiichi, listen to me. You survived. You endured things no child should face, and you're still here. You're still fighting. That strength, that resilience, it's yours." Mrs. Okafor sat carefully on the bed beside her daughter. "I know you have every right to hate us, to walk away and never look back. But if you'll let us, we want to earn your trust." "I don't know how to be rich," Keiichi said quietly. "I don't know how to live in a house where I'm not afraid of making noise." "We'll learn together," Mrs. Okafor said. "All of us. And if I can't, then we'll find a way to make the life fit you," Mr. Okafor said. "You're not broken, Adaze. You're bent, maybe. Scarred, certainly. But not broken." Keiichi looked around the room again, at the life that had been waiting for her return. "I want to try," she said finally. "I want to see if I can remember how to be your daughter. But I need time. I need patience." "Never," Mrs. Okafor said, and this time when she reached out, Keiichi didn't pull away. "We lost you once. The healing wouldn't be simple. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, marked by therapy sessions and difficult conversations, by nightmares and small victories. But in that pink room, surrounded by toys that had waited years for her return, Keiichi began to believe that maybe, just maybe, some lost things could be found again. Outside, the investigation was already beginning. The reunion with the Okafors was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, Adaze slowly began to piece together the life that had been stolen from her. Each morning brought new revelations, childhood memories triggered by familiar scents, the sound of her father's laughter, the way sunlight filtered through the mansion's windows. But healing wasn't instant. Some nights, she still woke up expecting to find herself back in the village, her hands automatically reaching for the broom that was no longer there. The family held her gently through these moments, understanding that love alone couldn't erase years of trauma. Mama Gloria hired the best therapists, while investigations continued into those who had orchestrated her disappearance. Justice was finally within reach, but more importantly, Adaze was home.